In the NFL, you never get as much time as you think you might have, right? We kind of do this thing with players, right? Where their rookie year, we feel like and we talk like they got years to fix things. But in reality, they got a year to fix some things. Or maybe in some special circumstances, 2 years to fix some things. Time is precious in the NFL. And at some point, just like a bird, a young bird, you're going to get kicked from the nest. And either you're going to be able to fly and you'll become an adult bird and you'll spread your wings and do all that great stuff, or you're going to splat on the pavement because you can't fly and you ain't ready to fly yet. This is where a lot of the Browns' young players are right now. A lot of potential. They could fly, spread their wings, become great players for this team, or they could splat. It's called make or break. This is where they at. We're going to start with the first player I think is going to have a make or break year is Harrison Bryant. Now, why do I think this? One, the situation he is in is quite peculiar because if you look at the Browns tight end room, it's going to be an odd man out, right? We know that David or Austin, one of them are gone, right? Any, mini, miny, mo, which one you want to let go. Either David Njoku's gone and he walks in free agency and they don't bring him back, or Austin Hooper's gone and they cut him because they don't want to pay him anymore for what's been pretty disappointing production. So either one of those guys are going to be gone. Only safe man, well, at least to get to training camp, is Harrison Bryant. So that means that Harrison Bryant is going to have an excellent opportunity either to be the number 2 tight end or maybe even the starting tight end. It's possible that the Browns go bye-bye with both David Njoku and Austin Hooper this offseason. It can happen. It's not far-fetched. And in that, I mean, Harrison Bryant would be the only dude on the roster. He'll have a major leg up. So Harrison's going to get his time to shine. That's the one thing he hasn't gotten since he's been drafted, right? He got some targets his rookie year. Then he fumbled like 2 times, I think. And then after that, they were out on giving him a ton of targets. So I don't know if it's a practice thing with him. And since then, he just hasn't gotten a bunch of targets. You don't know what kind of player he is. He had a great rookie camp. He had a great training camp too his first year. And you thought, man, the world's going to be his oyster. And we thought David Njoku. It's funny like how things have changed over the years. But 2 years ago, we thought David Njoku was in trouble because of Harrison Bryant. Now we want David Njoku to start over Harrison Bryant. Not because of any slight to Harrison Bryant, just because David has made steps in his next year. No, David is not going to be a premier tight end. He's not even going to be like Pratt Freiermuth in Pittsburgh, right? Like, I don't think that's where the Browns' number 1 tight end situation is going to be. I think the realistic expectation for the Browns, and this is on the high end to get out of the tight end position, is between the first and second tight end, you're going to want combined, whoever's the 1 and whoever's the 2 tight end, about 8 touchdowns and maybe 850 yards between the both of those tight ends. And I think you would be thrilled with that production. I think if you get more than that, awesome. But expecting more than that, even if you do bring back David Njoku, look, David Njoku ain't going to lead the league in receiving yards. He's not George Kittle. He's not Pat Freiermuth. Like that's a level below. He's not Mark Andrews. He's not one of those tight ends, but he is a good hand, right? He can create some explosives down the field, and he is a serviceable number 1 tight end, which you need in a system where you're going to have a bunch of tight ends. Harrison Bryant, on the other hand, I feel like he's a pretty prototypical number 2 tight end, right? Can block well enough to be out there and not give away which play you're going to do. Can run well enough as a route runner to get open. And can catch well enough to justify throwing the ball to. Not great at any one of those things, but good enough to be out there, good enough to be serviceable, and good enough to take advantage of some mismatches. Now, if he can do that, get out on the field and be serviceable this year, he'll probably have a pretty long NFL career. I think his comp is like Gary Barnidge. I think that's a real good comp for him. I know Gary had that one crazy year, but you have to remember the Browns were incredibly mediocre when those years happened with Gary. So somebody had to get the yardage production. It's kind of the same reason why, like, what was it? Terrell Pryor almost had 1,000 yards. Like, on a bad team, somebody's got to move the ball, and somebody just ends up being almost random at times. But yeah, outside of Gary's one Pro Bowl year, I kind of think that Harrison Bryant, like, if he turns into Gary Barnidge, I think that's pretty good for him. And it's going to be his year to shine, make or break, right? He hasn't gotten the ball a lot the last 2 years, especially last year. This is going to be his opportunity. If he cannot get targets this year, he just won't get them on the Browns, at least, because he's in a position to get targets. Now, speaking of somebody who might be in a position to get a ton of targets, let's talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones, the next guy on the list. DPJ's stock goes up and down pretty violently. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I've been high on him for the most part, but it's had some leaps and bounds in the market, right? You can buy low and buy high on Donovan Peoples-Jones, most certainly. But what DPJ, when he first came in, he was a 6th-round pick, so his stock was pretty low. Then comes into camp, and you look at him, and you're like, oh, this dude could be good. And then he has a really good training camp, has a pretty good preseason, and, his rookie year was not bad, right? I think he had a pretty good rookie year. We're looking up on him. And then training camp happened, and he was really good in training camp in 2021. Starts the year, doesn't get the ball, but you look at the tape. I know everybody focuses on the Odell tape and how Odell was always open on the tape. Sure. Donovan Peoples-Jones was open too. That got lost in all of that. Like, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the first half of the year was open all the time. He was getting open. He was getting separation all the time. So I was pretty high on him. I was like, I thought we needed to target him more so he can get the ball. They target him a lot in Cincinnati. Came through. Big game for DPJ. He always has one against the Bengals. And then after that game, Mans fell off a cliff. I don't know what happened to him, right? He was on this production, like arrow pointing up, and then the last quarter of this season, man, just he plateaued for a little bit, and then he was bad. Like, bad things just happened when he touched the ball. And now, one of the things with DPJ that I feel like we're just going to have to deal with. Now, I hope he changes them, but I'm going to be realistic about it. I think this is why Donovan Peoples-Jones did not get drafted in the first 5 rounds of the 2020 draft, is because he does these things. And what I mean by that is, Donovan Peoples-Jones, more than almost any Brown I've ever watched in my life, and almost any football player, like, there's a handful of guys I've seen do stuff like this. But Donovan Peoples-Jones especially is the most prone to have very, very, very dumb things happen when he has the football. Think of offensive head-scratching moments that you have seen throughout the last 2 years. A lot of them are punt returns, and a lot of them are Donovan Peoples-Jones doing some weird stuff. It just is what it is. I ain't judging the dude, but just weird stuff happens, right? He had the one play against Green Bay where he cut early and stepped out of bounds before he could catch the ball, so he ended up just non-completed. Because he tried to make too much of a, or did he fumble? He either stepped out of bounds before he could catch it, or I think he fumbled. Every time there's an interception thrown at Donovan Peoples-Jones' way, it's like he hits the ball and, like, volleyballs it up for grabs. Like, it's never just a normal drop with Donovan Peoples-Jones. It's always a spectacularly bad drop that, like, turns into a turnover with him. And don't even get me started on his punt return decisions. I have been saying this for 2 years. This man has the worst punt return decision making I've ever seen. He had bad kick return decision making. It ain't even much to think about when it comes to returning kicks. But when he has the football in his hands, this is the Achilles heel of Donovan Peoples-Jones. When he has the football in his hands, it could be awesome, it could be one of the most questionable plays you've seen all year. It's gonna be one of them two things. I hate to say it, nah, because he don't got Braylon Edwards in him. Because Braylon Edwards would just drop the ball. He didn't do wild things with the football, but Donovan has a knack to do wild things with the football. It makes you nervous. He can make plays, but it makes you really nervous because of how erratic he is with his decision making, especially when he has the ball in his hand. But that being said, again, it's another situation where Jarvis Landry might be gone, and it's just him and Anthony Schwartz. Anthony Schwartz is also another guy who's going to have a make-or-break year. We're going to need something from them two this year, right? Like, maybe you draft 2 wide receivers that could play this year in the draft, right? Maybe you trade back, get a late first, get an early second. Boom. You got 2 wide receivers from the draft that might be able to contribute. Then you also only got Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz, and maybe you sign a vet. But DPJ, either way that works out, he's going to be heavy in this rotation. Now, what are the expectations for DPJ? I don't know. For me, I would say I'd be happy if he had 800 yards, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns would be great. But 800 yards, I think, would be good production for him, right? Maybe if he can just cut back the wild plays, the weird plays that happen when he gets the ball. Like, if he can just take the profit, right? We talk about this with quarterbacks, but it's with everybody, right? What take the profit means, it's like, just take what's in front of you and don't try to make too much of it, right? Donovan Peoples-Jones, he has an issue of just taking what's in front of him and not trying to make too much of it, right? When he gets an inch, he tries to go a mile. And sometimes he gets that mile, and that's great. But a lot of the times, he don't get the mile, and then he loses his inch. And the next thing we know, somebody else got the football. That's what I worry about with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Can he flatten out some of the erratic stuff and just be the good football player that he's shown he could be? Because other than that stuff, he's a pretty good football player. Other than some of the drop issues, he's a pretty good football player. So if he can just iron that out, he'll be good. He'll be good. He'll get 800, maybe even 1,000 yards. I don't want to put that on him. But, he'll be a pretty good and serviceable number 2 receiver. I think that's what he is. He's a number 2 receiver. He's not a number 1 receiver. He does not have that kind of speed to stretch a defense. But he's pretty serviceable too. And if he can, but the thing is, when you're a number 2 receiver, there is no room for mistakes. You can't have the boneheaded plays that Donovan has sometimes as the number 2 receiver, because we're coming to you to be reliable. Think of TJ Houshmandzadeh, right? Super reliable. Hines Ward, even though he had number 1 production and he's a Hall of Famer, he was also somebody who was always the Z wide receiver. And sometimes in the slot, a lot of times in the slot, but he was always not the guy that's going to stretch the field, but the guy that was going to be reliable, right? That second guy on the other side of your X needs to be reliable. Can Donovan Peoples-Jones be reliable? If he can, he'll have a long NFL career. If he can't, he'll be bouncing around pretty soon. And I don't want that for him. Anthony Schwartz is another one. Can he turn his speed into actual routes? Can he run the right routes, right? Because we can talk all the live long day about Odell and whether he was running the right routes. I know that Anthony Schwartz was not running the right routes at times, because you can see the reaction of Baker, the offensive coordinator, and Kevin Stefanski on some of these plays where Anthony Schwartz just did not know the play or was confused for whatever reason. And that's why he didn't play late in the year. You wonder why they were putting in Jamarcus Brantley in the game. It's not a mystery to people who watched tape last year. Anthony Schwartz, he had a number of problems, but one of the main ones, and I'll be charitable to him, the main thing is he's not a great route runner at all. He's not an NFL level route runner. So can he turn that speed into route running? And if he can't, what can he turn that speed into, right? Because he's not a punt returner. They don't let him return punts. He's not good on those end arounds because he's not a good runner with the football. All he is a dude who runs 4-2-1. And that's useless unless you could run a route to get open, right? He can't run the route. And he can't catch consistently. Like, right, what does his 4.21 speed bring to this team? Well, 4.22 speed brings to this team. Right now, it's absolutely nothing. He's bringing absolutely nothing because he can't do the end arounds. He can't get open down the field. He can't run a route. He can't catch the ball. He's not good on screens. Like, what's that 4.22 speed going to bring? I need him to develop into a wide receiver, or just I'll settle for a weapon. Just be a weapon. Be a weapon. I would love him to be a weapon. Right now, he's a non-factor, and let's face it, this room ain't deep enough for us to be stashing non-factors in that wide receiving room. We need dudes who are going to be able to do something. And Anthony Schwartz, he needs to be able to do something. The next players that I want to talk about that it's going to be make or break, or possibly make or break with, is Nick Harris and James Hudson. Because J.C. Treadle and Jack Conklin are getting old, and they're starting to get hurt a lot. Especially Jack Conklin. Look, I'm just going to assume, and I apologize to the Jack Conklin fans out there, but I'm just going to assume James Hudson's going to be the starting right tackle this year. Not because he's better than Jack Conklin, but I feel like James is going to be on the field. I have no clue whether Jack's going to be on the field this year. And Jack's a great tackle when he plays. It's just he hardly can play. Like, we give a lot of flack to Denzel Ward. Jack Conklin's played 12 games as a Cleveland Brown in 2 years. I don't know the exact number, but I know he missed games in 2020, and he pretty much missed the whole damn season this year. I know he played in 5 or 6 games, but each of those games he might have played 3 snaps each in those games. He really was out for the whole year this year. So with Jack Conklin, and his injury history has been his injury history for quite a while now. And with that being the case, and he's getting older, we can't expect that thing to just change. So I'm just going to assume James Hudson's going to probably be the starting right tackle. Now, J.C. Treadle, on the other hand, he had an injury history in Green Bay. He hasn't had injury history in Cleveland. It's shaking out well for him. But he is getting older. He had some issues last year. Nick Harris had to step in, play it well. And the Browns have locked up all the offensive linemen that they're going to lock up for the next couple of years, right? They don't need to do anything with Jedrick Wills because he's under a first-round deal. They already locked up Wyatt Teller. They already locked up Joe Bitonio. So, the 2 spots that are going to be open, right tackle, center, those are the spots that we got. And Nick Harris and James Hudson were drafted. Well, James Hudson was drafted last year, Nick Harris 2 years ago. They were drafted to fill that role. James Hudson played well at the end of last year. I think he's probably going to play well next year. Nick Harris, if you need him to step in, he can step in. But with James Hudson especially, I think this is going to be a make-or-break year, because this is what we're going to evaluate him on, as his ability to be the right tackle of the future. Because if James Hudson does not have a good year this year in 2022, then the Browns are going to have to look at other options at right tackle, because they cannot afford to have a bad offensive line given their offensive situation. So those 2 players, I think they're going to have a make or break year. Nick Harris less than James Hudson, and it's kind of tragic that it's James Hudson hasn't before his 3rd year. But yeah, I think James Hudson's going to be put to the test a little bit more than Nick Harris is going to be this year. But both of them are probably going to be playing at some point this year, and definitely the year after. So they're going to want to find out about those 2, especially the season goes south. They're going to need to find out about those 2. Let's go to the last guy, and this is Demetric Felton, because, man, we need somebody to be a playmaker, and Demetric looked like he could become a playmaker. Now, he got phased out the offense for reasons that I don't disagree with, and it had nothing to do with Demetric Felton. It was just, you have Kareem Hunt, you have Nick Chubb, you have Jarvis Landry, you had David Njoku, you had other better options at the tail end of this season. And Demetric, he is not going to run a primary route, right? That's not what you have a 7th round pick out there in his rookie year to be the primary read, right? So that would require, Baker to get to his 3rd, 4th read, which he just didn't get to that often this year. So his production and his targets went down, but I don't think any of that's his fault. The reason I say it's make or break for him is because eventually, pretty soon here, the Browns are going to have to make a decision on what they want to do long term with Kareem Hunt. Do they want to ride that one out? He's getting older. His contract's going to be up soon. And this is going to be Demetric's chance to solidify his role on the roster. Also, look, third running back, because I'm just assuming that somebody's going to sign Dearness Johnson more likely than not. So he's going to be in that third running back spot. And we've seen third running back spot gets play. Like 2020 and 2021, right? We can joke about having Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, but 2020, we needed Demetric to step up to win a game here and there, right? Especially the Dallas game and the Indianapolis Colts game in 2020. And this year, he needed to step up to win 2 games this year, both the games that Case Keenum played. So third running back is an important role for this team, and Demetric's going to have to step up into that role. And running backs, especially 7th round pick running backs, they don't get the same time that other players get. It's kind of unfortunate because they're more developmental than other players, but the truth is that they might draft a running back. He's going to be playing to stay on a roster this year, and if he does, then that third running back spot is going to be important. He could do a lot. It's just about whether he's going to get that opportunity to do those things, and whether they're going to be more aggressive about giving him those opportunities because of what he's done in training camp. We'll see what happens with him, but I would love to see what he does in 2022. So those are the young guys. I'm excited to see what they make of their opportunities in 2022. Who are the young players that you're excited to see? Obviously, today, this was all offense. I'm probably going to do one on the defense, which is going to be much more exciting because the young players on the defense, we're not worried about if they're going to be dudes. We just worried about how big of dudes they're going to become in the NFL because they're already really good players. But, on the offense, we're growing that portion of the garden. But that's my thoughts on this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.